Hello, externs. This is Lisa Patterson. I am here to present to you a segment on procrastination. This is my information. As you can see, part of my title here, as I've added, is Master Procrastinator. So one of the reasons that this is a dear subject to me is that it is something that I struggle from. And we will get into some of the causes and some of the reasons behind why people might be procrastinators. But the reason I wanted to bring it to you as an option for a topic in this seminar that deals with working in an off-site setting, having a supervisor, juggling your classes alongside having an externship, is because this is a time when really being efficient and being able to manage your time is going to be valuable to you. And so this is something that I think that could be really helpful to you as we go along. So here is my contact information. At any time during this presentation, there may be things to click on, or there may be other resources that I can show you. So there will be links that I will put into Brightspace for you for further readings and other things. But as we get into getting over your procrastinating and also how it relates to your mental health and how getting a handle on it can actually reduce your stress and anxiety and depression, as well as help you excel in your classes and do much better. All of those things we are going to touch on. So some of you may recognize this guy. This is Tim Urban. He is famous actually for giving his talk on procrastinating, but he also has his own blog where he does a lot of different topics. But I wanted to show you this little clip. It's a short version of his talk, and you can click on the link below to get to the longer one, which is actually quite good as well. I will upload these slides so that you can click on all of the links in the PDF, so you will see those in Brightspace. But in the meantime, let's listen to what Tim has to say about procrastinating, because I think you will find it somewhat familiar.
So in college, I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. And I would want to do that, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. Now, I had a hypothesis that the brains of procrastinators were actually different than the brains of other people. And to test this, I found an MRI lab that actually let me scan both my brain and the brain of a proven non-procrastinator. And so I could compare them. So here's the brain of a non-procrastinator. Now, here's my brain. There is a difference. Both brains have a rational decision maker in them, but the procrastinator's brain also has an instant gratification monkey. Now, what does this mean for the procrastinator? Well, it means everything's fine until this happens. So the rational decision maker will make the rational decision to do something productive, but the monkey doesn't like that plan. So he actually takes the wheel and he says, actually, let's read the entire Wikipedia page of the Nancy Kerrigan-Tanya Harding scandal, because I just remembered that happened. The instant gratification monkey does not seem like a guy you want behind the wheel. He lives entirely in the present moment. He has no memory of the past, no knowledge of the future, and he only cares about two things: easy and fun. Now, sometimes it makes sense to be doing things that are easy and fun, but other times it makes much more sense to be doing things that are harder and less pleasant for the sake of the big picture, and that's when we have a conflict. Turns out that the procrastinator has a guardian angel, someone called the panic monster. Now, the panic monster is dormant most of the time, but he suddenly wakes up anytime a deadline gets too close, or there's danger of public embarrassment, a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. But there's a second kind of procrastination that happens in situations when there is no deadline. So if you want to have a career where you want to be a self-starter, something in the arts, something entrepreneurial, there's no deadlines on those things at first, because nothing's happening at first, not until you've gone out and done the hard work to get some momentum, to get things going. There's also all kinds of important things outside of your career that don't involve any deadlines, like seeing your family or exercising and taking care of your health. working on your relationship or getting out of a relationship that isn't working. Now, if procrastinator's only mechanism of doing these hard things is the panic monster, that's a problem, because in all of these non-deadline situations, the panic monster doesn't show up. And it's this long-term kind of procrastination that's much less visible and much less talked about than the funnier short-term deadline-based kind. And it can be the source of a huge amount of long-term unhappiness and regrets. I had a little bit of an epiphany. I don't think non-procrastinators exist. That's right. I think all of you are procrastinators. Now, you might not all be a mess, like some of us. And some of you may have a healthy relationship with deadlines. But remember, the monkey's sneakiest trick is when the deadlines aren't there. We need to think about what we're really procrastinating on, because everyone is procrastinating on something in life. That's a job for all of us. And it's a job that should probably start today. Well, maybe not today, but sometime soon.
So I think that's great. There's much more to the longer version where he talks more about what to do, but I think you'll recognize it. I think the panic monster is huge. We all have deadlines. Lawyers
So in college
are deadline people, but if you are constantly in a state of getting closer and closer to a deadline without really moving towards working on it, then your panic monster is going to get bigger and bigger. And if you live in that state all the time, you can imagine what that does to your state of mind and the state of your body. So seriously, if we start talking, that was a very funny introduction to procrastination. But if we really start thinking about what procrastination causes, or the causes of procrastination, why do we procrastinate? And we'll talk about the effects as well after. But, why do we procrastinate? A lot of people say it's because we're lazy. And when I was looking for materials to give you for this unit, a lot of the articles and videos I was seeing were overcome laziness by doing these particular things. And I really hate it when people call it laziness, because it isn't a failing of someone's character. It's usually caused by very measurable and very legitimate things. So one of a lot of the causes of procrastination could be feeling bored. You're just procrastinating doing something that just, you can't even face it. It's so boring. It could be that you don't believe you can do it. When you think about why people don't do things, a lot of times it's because they don't know how, or they think that they already know they're going to fail at it. So that can be a reason. It can be because they are fearful, or they have anxiety around that task. So it could be due to whether they think they can do it. It could be something that scares them by nature, or because of something that they're afraid they can't achieve. It could be something that triggers them. Perfectionism is a huge thing. They just keep putting off. I know it's going to take me 16 hours to do this thing perfectly. I'll wait until I have 16 hours free. Otherwise, it's not worth doing, because it needs to be, absolutely perfect. And then distractions. Obviously, there are people, many of us, who have that distraction monkey, who are constantly pulling us away. It could also be distractions legitimately in your life, whether you have people depending on you, children, or other people who need your attention, whether it's tasks that you have to do that compete, just doing your laundry and taking care of yourself that distract you from work or school that distracts you from, your family. So, or it could just be literally your brain saying, oh, look, a bird. Like, oh, look, that's nice over there. Or, oh, there's a new game out that I need to try that everyone else is playing. So lots of those things cause procrastination. But I don't think it's a moral failing to be a procrastinator. There are causes of it. There are a lot of ways that students deal with procrastinating, or have a relationship with procrastinating, as you can imagine. What is it to be a student except to have deadlines, right? There are so many times in your life as a student. For some people, it's the time in their life when there are things to procrastinate on the most. So studies show that half of all students procrastinate. I agree with Tim Urban. I think that is low. I think most people procrastinate in some way or another, and most people do suffer from some sort of anxiety around that. So the students who do procrastinate truly, though, who look at that graph that he had where they plan out, they want to plan it out, but they end up doing everything at the end. Um, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? They have less stress at the beginning of the semester, but end up having much higher stress than their peers at the end, because obviously they've pushed their work to that end time. It also means that from a practical standpoint, students often avoid asking for help. Oftentimes because they feel like, well, I can't admit that I'm this far behind. Or, I should have told the professor or the TA earlier in the semester that I was lost. Now I can't. They're just gonna yell at me. So many students really who could have gotten more help or could have understood the material better earlier in the semester don't seek that out because they've waited too long. Or feel like they can't. It's not that nobody would help them. I think it's more of an internal narrative that they give themselves that, oh, it's just too late to ask at this point. So there are this is just a couple, just a handful of things. There are many, many more. And I think if you sit and think about it, you could make a list of ways that procrastination affects you as a student, specifically in your student life. And ways that it affects the way that you study and manage your time. Okay, we can't talk about procrastination without linking it to mental health and wellness. And it goes both ways. I think some mental health issues can be causes of procrastination, but some procrastination can also be causes of mental health issues. Just because these are sometimes linked or correlated does not mean that one causes the other, but they are related to each other and they do often appear at the same time. And so that's all I really want to bring up is that, and there's some good articles. The one from McLean Hospital that was on a previous slide is great as well, talking about this. It makes sense, but sometimes we don't think it through. So, a mood disorder such as depression, anxiety, or bipolar, or other things that affect sort of energy levels, the motivation to do things, whether they are just, usually depression and anxiety and bipolar even keep us from doing things we love, never mind things that we're afraid of. So a lot of mood disorders obviously contribute to procrastination. On the flip side, if you find yourself having to procrastinate, that procrastination will then double down on the anxiety or the depression that you already have and make it worse. So those are sort of related in both directions. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are just a few things to think about in the mental health realm, just to give procrastination a little bit of legitimacy in terms of this is not just a laziness issue. So obsessive compulsive disorder ties in a little bit with the perfectionism piece that I was talking about, the ability to or the inability to let go of something, or having sort of an obsessiveness around not finishing or having to repeat things, or not being able to let them sit. So that takes many, many forms, depending on how it presents in a person. There are also related behaviors that aren't necessarily full-on disorders, but certainly are symptoms or habits that people have that are sometimes a symptom of having some mental health issues, or just something that people will seek help for in therapy that may not rise to the level of something that would be diagnosed officially, but certainly are worth seeking some help for with a therapist if possible, or other sources of therapy, whether it's sometimes you can do it yourself with meditation or other techniques. But those related behaviors are like working on whether you're a perfectionist and whether you can pull back from that and get into a good enough mindset instead of a perfect mindset. Ruminating means constantly rehashing and thinking over things. I just had this conversation. It was super awkward. Now I'm going to think about it in my head for 3 days. That can help if you can sort of get that under control. That has a piece of procrastination in it. Distraction, obviously, there are pieces if you work on being more focused. Fidgeting is piece, if you're a fidgeter, oftentimes that is an indication. Self-regulation is something that people work on all the time, making yourself do things that you don't want to do or doing things when you don't feel good. And substance abuse has a role in this as well, both because sometimes people self-medicate, but also because the abuse itself keeps you from doing things, which then pushes off your deadlines. So, like I said, it's a two-way street on these. It's not a causality one way or the other, but there are a lot of things that go into why procrastination happens, and it's extremely complicated. So, whether or not you are yourself experiencing anything on this list or anything like it, just be aware, even if it's a question of understanding other people, that there is much more involved in someone missing a deadline or waiting till the last minute to do things than just, oh, they're lazy or they don't have any discipline. There's a lot in there. Last but not least, you might have thought I forgot about ADHD, but I was saving it up for its own slide. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is probably the one you think of first when we think about procrastination, only because it is pretty much self-defined by not being able to pay attention. And so I wanted to show you this quick video specifically on ADHD and procrastination, because I know some people do, even as adults, find themselves diagnosed with ADHD, and there's so many ways to treat that now, and there's really nothing wrong with that, and a lot of people manage it, even at the highest levels that we are at, as far as academic prowess. But I think there's a lot to be gleaned from this video, even though it is geared towards ADHD. I think you'll see that we're going to repeat some of these ideas later on in the presentation. So let's take a minute just to hear what they have to say about this.
A quick disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only. If you're experiencing symptoms of ADHD, it's best to see a professional for a diagnosis. Here's a look at 5 ideas that could help you beat procrastination. This is what a task like doing the dishes may look like to some people. This is what a task like doing the dishes may look like to a person with ADHD. When tasks feel this complex, is it any wonder people with ADHD procrastinate? Experts define procrastination as the tendency to delay activities that have to be completed before a deadline. Everybody procrastinates. However, people with ADHD may find that they do it more often than most. Let's get one thing straight. Some people confuse procrastination with laziness. We are not being lazy. People with ADHD want to try and do a task. It's just that procrastination can happen more regularly for us. It can be more extreme and more challenging to control. Everyone experiences ADHD in their own way. Here are 5 ideas that you could try to help you with it. 1. Create a ritual. If you repeat an action regularly, your brain can eventually do that action automatically without considering it. You may already have some habits that you didn't realize you had. You may start the day with a glass of orange juice or hang your car keys in a particular place so you know where to find them. To create a ritual, you could set aside blocks of time for essential tasks and stick to doing those tasks in that time. It will take time to become a habit, so stick with it. This can help you get rid of decision fatigue and can increase focus. To begin with, set a timer to remind yourself to do the task, and in time, it will become a ritual. 2. Match your energy to tasks. For people with ADHD, different jobs can require different energy levels. Work out when you're most energized and reserve those times with your more demanding chores. If you experience periods of low energy, focus on the tasks that are either simple or less mentally demanding. This does require a degree of planning, but once you understand your energy levels more, you can use it to your advantage. 3. Make mistakes. Some people with ADHD pursue perfection. This can lead to procrastination through self-criticism and fear of failure. Instead of striving for perfection, embrace the good enough mindset. Focus on completing and then returning to the task if you have the time. If you're writing a paper, remember that the first draft will not be the final piece. You'll edit it, so write like no one else will be reading it. This gives you the freedom to have more fun with the project rather than it becoming a rigid process. 4. Introduce novelty. Monotony can quickly lead to boredom and procrastination for people with ADHD. By injecting novelty into your tasks, they become more engaging. There are many ways to do this. You could change your work environment or explore new techniques. This can get the dopamine pumping. This is a neurotypical brain with dopamine production. It can be described as a smooth and continuous line that steadily produces the happy hormone as they need it. This is an ADHD brain. It's more like a wave. We may have very high amounts of dopamine at times, but only for a short period, and then nothing. When we change our perspective on a task, it helps to maintain a level of interest. 5. Strategic breaks. Recharge your cognitive energy by allowing yourself a break. Long periods without a break can lead to your motivation dropping because you're running low on fuel. Planning breaks in advance prevents reaching a point of exhaustion where it becomes difficult to notice the need for a break. Add short intervals to your work routine to give your mind a break, like going for a walk, drinking a glass of water, or stretching. Although suggesting an interruption in your workflow may sound odd, pushing through without breaks can lead to diminishing returns and decreased overall productivity. Overcoming procrastination requires a combination of self-awareness, planning, and strategies that work for you. Remember that these strategies may need time and consistency to become habitual, but it's worth the effort when you find something that works for you. If you want more tips and strategies to tackle ADHD, subscribe to our channel. We provide valuable insights and support to help you thrive.
So I like that. If you have ever been diagnosed with ADHD, then I hope that those tips help you. But even if you have not, this is not an encouragement for the whole class to decide that they need to go get diagnosed. I do think that for anyone who does not have an ADHD diagnosis, these tips are also helpful. So that's why I wanted to include it. The flip side is true. There are a lot of the other techniques that we're going to talk about that tie in directly to a lot of the techniques that people who have been diagnosed with ADHD will also use. So you'll see some overlap there. So I don't want you to be thrown off by the idea that that video is geared specifically towards people who have been diagnosed with ADHD, because I do think all of the tips were very interesting. And I think it's also helpful to have some insight if you know anyone. If you are not diagnosed with ADHD, but you know people who are, it's always helpful to know what they are going through and what their brain is telling them. And I think that's helpful as well to build empathy with other people. But I do like that as a good set of tips for people.
A quick disclaimer.
So as we move forward, I just have some other tips for you. I found that there are a number of ways that those of us who have varying degrees of, or causes, I guess, of procrastination can try. We're going to talk about Kaizen. We're going to talk about the Pomodoro technique. We're going to talk about Parkinson's law, the Seinfeld method, and the Eisenhower matrix. Okay, so first off, Kaizen. I don't have a video for this one. It's pretty easy to think about, but basically the idea is that Kaizen is a Japanese system. It is actually pretty famous in the quality assurance field. It means continuous improvement. It literally means change wisdom. Kai means change and Zen means wisdom. The idea is that if you continuously improve, even 1% at a time, you will ultimately, it will ultimately add up to huge improvements. And so in our particular inquiry today, The idea is that a little continuous activity is better broken up into small chunks than, setting aside that 16 hours all in one time at one time. And a lot of times that's why you can't start. So I find myself doing this. I go, oh, I have to do this thing. It's going to take me at least 3 hours. I won't have 3 hours for another week that I can set aside. So that's going to have to get put off. So if there is a way to break that activity into smaller chunks to say, no, I don't need 3 hours all in a row. I could do a half an hour on the first part, or I could do a really quick draft or a quick outline that would take me 15 minutes and just try to do a little bit of continuous activity into small chunks. That would really get me going. The other piece of Kaizen I find is that it helps with inertia. What I mean by that is if you've ever thought about starting a task or starting on a project, the hardest part is to just start it. You're thinking about all the unknowns in front of you and not really wanting to get involved in it yet. It's a lot of energy just to go from not doing it to doing it. If you tell yourself, you know what, I'm just going to commit myself to working on this for 5 minutes. I'm going to work on it for 5 minutes and then I'm going to get up and I'll do something else. I have 5 minutes before I have to be somewhere, or I can work on it for 5 minutes before I do something else. And then sit down, and even if it's just typing crappiness, or something that you don't think is very good, but just making yourself write it down, or just writing down notes about your ideas about what you're going to be doing. I'm talking about schoolwork here, or just starting to read an article that you have to read or a case that you have to read. Or just going through your emails and looking for a couple of things that you have to answer. If you just commit to working on something for 5 minutes, the accessibility of that promise to yourself that it's only going to be 5 minutes gets you to start it. It really lowers that barrier to the beginning. And what will happen is a lot of times it's long enough to work on something for 5 minutes that you think, oh, you know what? I'm already doing this. I'll stick with it for a while. And the next thing you know, you've been working on it for 20 minutes. And the next thing you know, you've been working on it for longer. And you get into that flow state where you're no longer worried about it. It no longer feels onerous. You're kind of in it. It's kind of making sense. You're going from one thing to another. Your brain is engaged and you actually end up working on it for a while. You may not finish it, right? But it at least gets you going. And you know what? If that doesn't happen, if you really only work on it for 5 minutes and then you leave, you're 5 minutes closer than you were before. So that's Kaizen, break it into small chunks with the one actual exercise of committing to work on the thing that you're putting off for 5 minutes. This works with cleaning as well, or other kinds of non-studying tasks. It works with exercise. Just walk for 5 minutes, and you may find that 5 minutes turns into longer once you get going. Okay, so that's Kaizen. So the Pomodoro technique. I'm not going to say much about this because we have a pretty good video for students on Pomodoro. But basically, if your brain, as you could see in the ADHD video, your brain really wants to take breaks. So the Pomodoro technique is a way to trick it into giving it those breaks so it doesn't sabotage you.
Hello, my Socratica friends. We're here to help you be a great student. Today, we're going to talk about a problem that every student faces at some point: burnout. We've all done it. We're faced with a giant task, a long paper to write, or a huge test to study for, or just the day-to-day workload. We have hours and hours of work to do, and we think we can power straight through it, but we always fail. We get exhausted and discouraged. There's got to be a better way. There is. The Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. Why would one of the greatest study tips of all time be named after a tomato? It's because of this. The simple novelty kitchen timer has the power to revolutionize your study. It doesn't have to be a tomato. My timer is a little mouse. Now, you don't have to run out and buy a timer if you don't already have one. You can set an alarm on your phone or your computer. But setting a timer is the key to this technique.
We've installed the Toggle Chrome extension. You can use it to track all your projects. Just go to the settings and enable the Pomodoro mode.
Most of us can stay focused on a task for 20 to 30 minutes max. After that, our minds begin to wander. We check our email, visit a few websites, send a message to a friend. Pretty soon, another 30 minutes have gone by and we don't know what happened. That was your brain insisting it needed a break, so it just took it. We can put a stop to this time wasting. How? By planning to waste time. Just a little to give our brains a rest. You'll be amazed at how giving yourself a planned break feels so much better than stealing unplanned breaks. Here's how we do it. Let's say you have a huge reading assignment, 3 whole chapters in this giant textbook. You know that in the past, if you power through it, that much reading took you at least 3 hours. Of course, that included a lot of distractions, browsing the internet, responding to chats, The truth is, you don't really know for sure how long it takes you to get your reading done, because it's been all mixed up with other activities. But this time, we're going to break it into 25-minute chunks where your assignment is all you do. Make yourself a promise that you will work uninterrupted for 25 straight minutes without stopping. You can do it. It's only 25 minutes. Before we start, get everything you need to do your work. We're not going to waste any time walking around getting supplies when you should be doing the job at hand. You should have paper for taking notes, highlighters, pens, sticky notes, and a glass of water. Also, make sure you shut out distractions. Silence your phone and put a note on your door that you are studying and need quiet time. Set your timer for 25 minutes. Now, read. Don't let anything stop you. What about if you get distracted? If something occurs to you that you want to look up online, or you think you need to send a text to a friend, or whatever, just jot a quick note to yourself on a sticky note and set it aside. Don't let anything stop your reading for those 25 minutes. Break time. Now stop and take a real break. You have 5 minutes. Set the timer for 5 minutes and get up, stretch your legs, stretch your back, go use the restroom. Send that text you thought of while you were studying. You may also want to rest your eyes for 5 minutes. Whatever you do, just make sure it's not related to your studying. You're taking a real mental break. Break time's over. Back to work. Set your timer for another 25 minutes and continue your reading. Again, don't let anything distract you. You'll be amazed how easily you can get through 25 minutes when you know a break is coming up. You can do up to 4 of these Pomodoro sessions at a time before you need a longer break. After 4, either call it a day, or if you do have more work to do, set your timer for 30 minutes. Go have some lunch. Go for a walk with a friend. A lot of people fall into the trap of not taking these longer breaks, but they are very important. They give your brain some time to synthesize all the material you've been studying and make sense of it. Give your brain a chance to do this important task. Then, back to work. How many Pomodoro cycles did it take to do your reading assignment? It's a good idea to keep a record of how long it took you to do your work. Maybe make a note in your planner next to the assignment. This will give you a better idea of how to plan your time in the future.
You can create a report in Toggle to see how you've spent your time. Apparently, we spend a lot of time on Twitter.
I use the Pomodoro technique all the time, not only for studying, but also for mundane things like cleaning my room. I find I can get my work done so much faster by using this technique. What's more, at the end of 4 of these sessions, I don't feel nearly as tired as if I had tried to work straight through. Try it and see. Now keep in mind, you may find that 20-minute sessions work better for you. On the other hand, some of you might get away with 30. But don't push it. Remember, taking care of your brain is an important part of being a great student.
This video is sponsored by Toggle. Click the link below to get started.
No kidding.
Want to help us make more great videos?
So sorry about that. I like the video do ignore the Toggle ad. You do not have to use Toggle to do that. And it does cost money, so I am not endorsing it and I'm not telling you to go buy it. But I do like the technique. So Pomodoro is pretty famous. If you click on the link for the information there, it's another article by a different author that does break it down into, they actually have a little chart where you can figure out ways to figure out how many little Pomodoros it might take to do certain tasks, and you can really get fancy with it. But I like Pomodoro as well. That's really good. I love that you chunk all of your distractions into a little break as opposed to letting them kind of seep into your work time, and it helps with concentration. And remember that this is different from Kaizen, even though they both say that you break things into chunks. Kaizen has you break things into chunks basically just to get you to start. They are kind of related, but Pomodoro's actual technique is based on the actual rhythm of the work and the break and the work and the break, whereas Kaizen is just getting a small chunk to trick you into starting and hopefully getting possibly into a longer flow. Now you may use Kaizen to get you to start, and then if you do get going and you want to go longer, it may turn into a Pomodoro, which then you take a break after 25 minutes. So they can be used together, certainly, but they are really two different things and they come from two very different places. But you can see how some of these are techniques that you can pick and choose and see what you like and see what works in a particular time.
Join the Socratic.
So Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law is easy to explain. Tasks expand to fill the time you've allotted to them. If you've ever said, hey, you know what, I think this email is going to take me 45 minutes, it probably will. You'll probably do all your typing in the last 3 minutes. So maybe you could have been doing something else for the first 35 minutes or so. So let's see what they have to say about Parkinson's law.
Have you ever had a project that could be done just right away in a few hours, but since it didn't need to be done until 3 months, it went off the to-do list and stayed there for weeks? Then, after a ton of mental procrastination, you start to work on it slowly throughout a couple of days. Once it's finished, you realize that you could have completed it within a few hours of intense concentration and achieved the same quality level. If this has ever happened to you, then I'm here to share a productivity tip that helps you to be more efficient with your time, work faster, and get more things done in less time. Parkinson's law states that a task will swell in importance the more time you allow to complete it. What this means is that the longer you give yourself to complete something, the bigger and the more difficult it's going to feel. Because what usually ends up happening is that you're going to procrastinate and do other less important things. And even if you're distracting yourself, that task is going to take up your mental energy, giving you pressure and stressing you out, since it's still at the back of your mind. So for example, if you have 24 hours to complete a task, the time pressure forces you to focus on execution and you have no other choice but to work faster. So how do you use this law in your life? The action step we can take from Parkinson's law is to set shorter deadlines for yourself. Try setting time limits and deadlines for your tasks, meetings, and everything you want to complete. If you give yourself forever to do something, it is going to take you forever to do it. Focused, intense attention for a short period of time is often better than extended, lazy attention over a long period of time. When you do an activity, give yourself a set amount of time to finish it. Set a timer and push yourself to get it done during that time. If you're competitive, see it as a personal competition where you're trying to be better than you were yesterday. In order to give a task 100% of your undivided attention, saying no to distractions is a must. Remember that focus comes from eliminating distractions. Being aware of Parkinson's law can help you understand how your brain perceives time, so you can make the most out of your day by setting shorter time limits, which increases your focus and makes sure you're not wasting valuable time on the task. In this way, you can move on to the next task so you can keep on going and keep on growing. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.
So Parkinson's law for me is really a way to get a lot of short tasks done that you've been putting off. So I found, especially with things like emails or check-ins with people, or maybe you had something that you had to write that wasn't very long, or you needed to make a list, or you needed to arrange something, call a restaurant and set up a reservation, and you've just been putting it off. A lot of times, you build them up to be more than they are. You may have heard the saying, if you need something done, ask a busy person. And a lot of people who are very busy all the time are very proud of that. But it's true. If you're already doing many things very quickly in a row, and you just add another thing once you're sort of in the flow of doing a lot of things quickly, and you're kind of, feels like rushing, or it feels like last minute, but you're not. They don't take very long. You're just in that flow of doing things quickly. You'll find that a lot of the tasks that you thought were going to take a long time, or that were going to be really hard, really weren't. So by setting a shorter deadline, or by doing them sooner than you thought, or just getting them done, I have to send an email, I'm going to put that off till tomorrow because I want to concentrate on it. No, do it within the next half hour. It's not going to be that hard. If you start it and it gets to be complicated, you can always put it aside, but set yourself short deadlines for things, even if you think they're a little shorter than they need to be. I found that Parkinson's law also helps with perfectionism. A lot of times with people with a perfectionist tendency is that they think that they need to spend more time on things than they do. Now, being a perfectionist can be a great thing because you have a lot of attention to detail, and you're never going to make typos, and everything is always going to be perfect. And so I'm not advocating that you now throw out all of that and turn in sloppy work. But what I'm saying is a lot of times you can dash off a draft that seems sloppy to you and not your best work, but you wouldn't have done it because you kind of feel like it was bad, right? You just sort of wouldn't dash off a draft. You would carefully write very slowly. When actually dashing off a draft that's kind of bad really fast, can actually get you 90% of the way towards that perfect thing that you're eventually going to turn in once you've actually edited it. So I've worked with students on cover letters a lot with this, where, they're like, look, I don't want to write cover letters. I applied to all the jobs that don't ask for cover letters because I hate writing them. And a lot of times what I will do is I will sit with a student in my office impromptu, like we weren't even planning on doing this, and I'll say, just quickly, say out loud as though you were just talking to yourself what you were going to say in that cover letter. And we quickly write down basically what that is. And at the end of the day, almost verbatim what they said out loud is what ends up in the letter, because it was fine. It sounded great. There was nothing unprofessional about it. It was what was on their mind. It was to the point, and it sounded fantastic. So all that time they had built up in their head that they thought that task was going to take, it actually didn't. We did it pretty quickly. So Parkinson's law also helps you get past that. If it has to be perfect, it's going to take a long time and I have to do it later, as opposed to, let me just set a short deadline, let me bang something out and see what happens. And it sort of hits perfectionism and procrastination both at the same time. So that is Parkinson's law. So the Seinfeld method is the fourth method. This one is pretty simple to understand. And yes, it is that Seinfeld of the Seinfeld show. Basically, at one point he was interviewed and says that he writes a joke every day. And the way he gets it done is he literally has to cross off on his calendar every day that he writes a joke. So it's a pretty easy idea, but let's
Hi
listen.
everyone, it's Yanis here, and in this video, we will explore what is the Seinfeld method. If you want to build lasting habits that can transform your life, then you need to try out this simple and easy strategy. If this is your first time on his channel, then make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to get updates on the latest videos about time management and productivity. Jerry Seinfeld is one of the world's most successful comedians of all time. An approach he used to achieve success in his life is now called Seinfeld strategy. The key component of his method is consistency. Here are the steps that you need to follow if you want to put Seinfeld strategy to work. Step 1, get a wall calendar. It's the best if you can get a yearly calendar where you can see the whole year on one big page. Step 2, put it on the dominant wall. It is important that you place it somewhere where you can see it every day, so it works as a reminder. Step 3, practice. Whatever skill you want to become better at, you'll have to learn through practice and repetition. You might want to write a book, learn to play the piano, become more confident on being recorded, or learning to code. The fact is that you have to practice. Don't worry if you're not motivated, and don't worry if you're not producing a great result. The focus here is on consistent practice. Step 4, get a red marker. Once you have completed your practice, you have to put big X over that day. This might be writing 500 words every day for your book, or learning coding 90 minutes every day. Just make sure that it is something that you can measure. Step 5, don't break the chain. As you keep doing this, you'll be building the chain, and your job is to keep the chain going. So here you go. These are the simple steps that you can use to start building lasting habits in your life that will help you to achieve your goals. I hope that you enjoyed this video and I was able to give you a quick overview of what Seinfeld method is and how you can use it to build lasting habits.
So easy, right? So this is something that I just wanted to bring up because it doesn't fit perfectly into all of our tasks for law school, but it is pretty good for life. So if you wanted to make sure you took a walk every day, or you were practicing something, as he said, you wanted to meditate every day, or you had something else that you wanted to do. The idea here is completion. The reason you get a paper calendar and you put it on the wall is so there's a big glaring day that is not X'd out, that looks at you and taunts you and makes you stressed out, because it's that pressure of making sure that you cross that thing off every day that makes you do it. So this is really for something that you need to do consistently. If you find that it's something you wanted to do every week, obviously you could find a weekly calendar, or you could find some other mechanism that lets you actually make a mark at that interval. And so that's something that you can adapt yourself, but it's the idea, it's one of the most physical ways that I'm bringing to you today, that you can get yourself to do things that are timely. So that one is fun, and it's also fun because it is a famous person that it is named after.
If you enjoyed.
So the final topic that I have for you today, we're almost done, is another famous person. This is the Eisenhower matrix. And I'm going to subject you to one more short video. It's only about 6 minutes, I think. If you haven't heard of Eisenhower, he's a former president. But this is a very famous matrix when it comes to time management. And this is less about making yourself actually do a task, as it is about choosing and prioritizing the tasks that you are going to do, so that you're not wasting time and procrastinating on things that aren't really that important. So I will let them take over from me.
In today's era, we wake up to more emails, calls, and chat conversations than ever before. When we're at work, we have an obligation to appear busy by making sure we respond to all these incoming requests. But it can often leave us with a feeling of dissatisfaction with our own productivity. It's all too easy to be stuck in a blindfold mode of procrastination by handling items we think are urgent but never important. Maybe you end up spending your whole day in your email inbox trying to get to inbox 0. Or maybe you get all your errands done, but not that book you've been wanting to write. The point is, for most people, it's often difficult to establish a clear boundary in knowing what we should be working on and what we find ourselves doing. If you often feel a lack of accomplishment at the end of your work days, then you might benefit from a little-known method to add to your mental toolbox. Eisenhower was perhaps one of the most larger-than-life figures to hold the office of President of the United States. Prior to becoming the 34th president, he attained the coveted rank of 5-star general in the US Army, where he played a major role in planning and executing invasions against the Nazis in Africa, France, and Germany itself. While president, he managed to launch the interstate highway system, as well as launching NASA, DARPA, and more. Throughout his life, he managed to remain incredibly productive, working his way up the ranks to eventually become the president. His productivity has been extensively researched, and by far one of the most useful strategies he's credited for devising is now known as the Eisenhower box. It's a simple method to help you avoid procrastination and prioritize what you should be working on. Here's how it works. You create 4 different boxes with the following categories. Urgent and important, tasks to do immediately. Important but not urgent, tasks to schedule later. Urgent but not important, tasks to delegate to someone else. Neither urgent nor important, tasks to eliminate. This simple exercise teaches you to quickly identify the importance and urgency of tasks on your plate and to separate them accordingly. It's often easy to unintentionally procrastinate by doing tasks ourselves, which could have been delegated or eliminated altogether. We all have our own method of task management, whether you use a notebook or one of the many to-do list managers out there. None of them really incorporate the Eisenhower method, because tasks grouped into 4 separate boxes isn't an efficient or pretty way to work with the items on your plate. However, it's not the act of placing tasks into separate boxes that is necessary, but the skill of recognizing when you're in a situation that requires you to prioritize the tasks which demand your attention to avoid procrastinating on them. I found the method to be most helpful when dealing with an overabundance of work, when the amount of tasks is overwhelming. Taking a few minutes to arrange and prioritize your tasks according to the logic of the Eisenhower method can be quite helpful. You could use something like an app to truly have a virtual Eisenhower box, or even download a printed copy to fill out with a pen or pencil. Another method is to incorporate the overarching philosophy into your workflow. If you don't already prioritize the items on your to-do list on a daily or weekly basis, I'd highly recommend you try it out for just a week. Just make a mental commitment to yourself to plan out your workday in your calendar by scheduling the time you'll work on certain tasks, or prioritizing the items on your to-do list from top to bottom. In my own workflow, I'll review all the items on my plate at the beginning of each day. I'll assign the important and urgent tasks with a P3 red priority level, meaning I need to work on them first. Important but not urgent tasks might get a P2 orange priority, while the smaller urgent tasks will be assigned a P1 yellow priority. Another useful strategy taught by this method is that it can help make sure you ask the right questions. Not every task is important enough to demand your time and attention. For example, it's often helpful to look at all the work you do and then ask yourself which tasks have a direct effect on the amount of money you bring in. Establishing a mindset of differentiating the most important tasks on your list can isolate the ones you don't need to do. For those tasks I don't need to do, I'll move them to a trashed folder in my to-do list app. Whereas if it's something an assistant can do, I'll move it to a delegated folder and let them take it over. Using methods like the Eisenhower box or even your own prioritization system is by no means perfect. The most difficult part of any process always comes down to execution. Maybe we ignore the important tasks and focus only on the urgent ones because we truly believe in the moment that it's the most important thing to be working on, only later having a feeling of regret that we didn't find any time to work on that big project today. Prioritizing tasks in any system requires concerted effort and self-discipline to follow your own rules. If you find yourself still working on the wrong tasks, then you might need to time box the important tasks or schedule them into a specific part of your day. For example, if I have a deadline coming up in a week for an article I need to write, it's easy to get overwhelmed thinking about all the research and writing I'll need to do. The best way to make progress while still giving myself the time to handle the urgent tasks is to schedule it in for a small period of time in the days leading up to the deadline. As with anything we find resistance towards, it's easier to overcome the inertia of getting started if it's reduced to smaller chunks of time.
So we saw a little overlap there with a little chunking. That sounds like Kaizen a little bit and maybe a little Pomodoro. But this one I thought was interesting. Maybe not so much on the what makes you the most money, but which maybe we're not all in the same place as this guy. But if you are getting an assignment, for example, at your placement in your externship, this is a good question to ask. What is the priority and how important is this, especially if you have other assignments from that office that you need to juggle. And so that can also help you figure out how to prioritize even just the work from one particular place. But certainly in your overall schedule, how do you prioritize that against readings that you have to do for class, things that are due, other things in your life that are coming up, and being able to decide what's important, what isn't. We don't all have someone to delegate to, right? But whether or not that is something that someone can help you with, is it something that someone that you know is better at? If it's like with a student group and you're supposed to do something for that, but someone else can do that task in exchange for something you do for them later. There are ways that delegate box doesn't necessarily have to be just, you know, in a hierarchical workplace. So that's how the Eisenhower matrix works. It's a way to really start playing around with the idea of putting the things that are the most important first, and how do you figure out which things those are. So that is the end of the tips and the end of this presentation. I hope that you've gotten some good tips from listening to some of this, and that you will come back to them at times when you need them. You may not need them all right now, but maybe it will trigger something in your head later on if you find yourself with a task that you need to cross off every day that you don't have right now. You might think of it in the future or something like that. And certainly, if you have any questions or concerns, please do reach out to me. If you have other readings that you've ever run across on time management or procrastination, please do let me know. We will share them. So thank you all for your attention this week. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon.